How could I without my mic? Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of South and West Plans Panel. My name is Councillor Eileen Taylor, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. Today's meeting is being streamed on Leeds City Council YouTube channels, so the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. South and West Plan Panels deals with application from the south, northwest, and west of the city. The aim of the panel is to hear all relevant information from applicants, members of the public, and council officers to help members of the panel make their decisions. I'll now ask members on the panel and officers to introduce themselves. Let's start on the left, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ahmed Hunaidi, and I'm the Highways Officer.
Councillor Sharon Hamilton, Meanwood and Moreton Ward.
Councillor John Garvani, Horsforth Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Kaylee Brooks, Little London and Woodhouse Ward.
Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Neil Walshaw, Heading Lane, Hyde Park.
Good afternoon, Councillor Jules Hesselwood, Bromley and Stanley Ward.
Good afternoon, Sarah Holmes, part of the Plans Panel team.
Good afternoon, Daniel Ummerth, part of the Plans Panel team.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Robert Finnegan. I am a Morley North councillor.
Good afternoon, Councillor Trish Smith. I represent Pudsey.
Good afternoon, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adelaide Wharfdale Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Colin Campbell.
Hello, everyone. Natasha Prosser, clerk to the panel.
Good afternoon, Pippa Plumtree Varley, Principal Legal Officer and Legal Advisor to the panel this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
Good afternoon, Steve Butler, Group Manager for South and West and Lead Officer at South and West Plans Panel, and for a second time, Presenting Officer.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Brooke, for subbing, and also welcome members of the public who are here today to listen. Could I move the agenda to item 1? Tasha, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. There's no appeals against refusal of inspection of documents. Agenda item 2, there's no items which require the exclusion of the press and the public. Agenda item 3, I'm not aware of any late items of business. Agenda item 4, can members declare any interests? No. Agenda item 5, apologies from Councillor Reagan and Councillor Bowden. Councillor Brooks here in attendance for Councillor Bowden.
Without my mic. Councillor Campbell, sorry.
We're talking very quietly today, Chair. Page 12, where it says resolved, I think on that list of bullet points, there should be a reference to community use of the facility and the management stroke maintenance of the historic track, which goes through the middle of the site. Because we did raise those at the time.
Yeah, I'm sure that will be corrected, Dasha. Any other comment? No. So could I have some approve the minutes? Councillor Walshaw and Councillor Finnegan. So there's no more matters arising. Could I, item 7. Proposal of new 3G pitch and tennis court and associated fence up to 4.5 meters high, former South Leeds Golf Course and Gypsy Lane, Beeston. I'm sure members are very familiar with this application, so I won't go into any details at this moment. I'll hand over to the planning officer to present there.
Chair, can I ask a question? Because I'm genuinely worried about an email I was sent yesterday.
Councillor Anderson, we will address that.
No, but I'm not. I'm saying I don't know whether I want to be part of this discussion today, because if there's to be a judicial review coming forward as a result of a number of emails we've received this week and the one that we got from the exec member yesterday, I do not want to be part of trying to pretend anything. I just want clarification on the email that we were sent yesterday by the executive member, what the legal, before we start discussing this, because I have concerns that my independence has been eroded slightly from that email.
I'll let Steve, we was going to address that. And also Steve will bring that up. And the legal officer. Okay.
Chair, yes, thank you. I was going to make reference to it in my presentation. I've taken it as a further letter from the councillor Pryor, to be just maintaining support for the application in terms of my presentation, but Pippa may want to say something from a legal standpoint.
So we are taking the approach that all members here today have had view of this email that has been sent, and therefore it is effectively from Councillor Brooks.
Apologies, I've not had sight of it.
Can send that to you, but Steve is going to recount the details and the sort of go over the summary of that, and therefore that it can be taken as a letter of representation, although the members not being able to speak today because of the public speaking rights and protocol that covers this, because it is a matter that has come back to the panel, but we are taking it as a late letter of representation so that the views can be shared. And obviously, because all members here present have had sight, apart from Councillor Brooks, and that's why Steve is providing the summary, that it can therefore be that all members have the same information before them as that as a late letter of late representation. It is also in the main raising issues which have been covered before, discussed before, and that have been addressed in the officer report on this matter.
Can I just, I appreciate Councillor Brooke hasn't seen this and presumably will get a sight of it. Can I just ask, is this a letter of representation from an individual councillor, or is this a representation from a member of the executive board expressing presumably the view of the executive board?
I'm not sure what I can't speak for that individual, what he expects, Councillor Campbell, as you know. He emailed each and every one of us and copied everyone in it. So I'm reading it the way you are reading it. And is Councillor Pryor here? I don't know if Councillor Pryor would like to just clarify the email, why you sent the email the way you did. Please do.
I think with respect, Chair, I can't see who's behind me, but maybe
well, Councillor Campbell, you asked me a question you asked a question that I can't answer on the behalf of the individual. I'm giving the individual time to explain to you the reason for that email. I haven't spoken to Councillor Pryor since last night, so we have nothing. All of us receive an email, members.
I appreciate it.
So please let him explain why he sent the email and what he expected.
Can I again get a legal opinion before he does? And I'm quite happy to hear him if it's okay. In that, are we accepting a precedent that certain individuals can come and explain their emails to us? Because in the past, we've never done this.
Campbell, that is totally different now. You asked me a question that I can't answer because I did not send the email. I did not sit with the individual to write the email. I cannot give the reason why he wrote that email. So I'm asking him to clarify it on your behalf. This is the question. So legal could answer that.
So we are taking it as a letter of representation. It's at the chair's discretion if we now take the step to responding to get the clarification that you sought, Councillor Campbell, as to the background to in what status that has been submitted by Councillor Pryor. So it's chair's discretion to put that to Councillor Pryor.
Because I want a straight answer for you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Pryor, over to you.
Good afternoon. Yes, I wrote the letter in my capacity as Executive Board Member for Economy, Culture and Education.
council, behalf of Leeds City Council, he is recommending that we approve this application today, so that there would be no detrimental effect on the education of children. That's what I took from the email, and I feel that I can't. How can I, in all consciousness, say I don't have my mind made up already? I'm sitting here. I've received an instruction from the exec member, who we've got to respect in their role as the exec member, on speaking on behalf of the council. I am concerned as to how I might be viewed by the members of the public, thinking, well, is this a sham because we've already know that the instruction has been given by the administration? That's the point I'm making.
Totally understand, Councillor Anderson and Campbell, what you are saying, and I quite understand the way the email read. However, a question was asked, and there's two answers. There's a yes and a no. So it's your opinion. At the last meeting, there's quite a few bullet points for what went back, and this is what we are going to focus on today and what you required at the last meeting. We will not take what Councillor Pryor said in his email. You are going to give your judgment today based only on what present in front of you. That's the whole idea of it. And I don't know if Councillor Pryor wrote it on the behalf of the council, maybe wrote it as himself, as an exec member. But today we are here to discuss what you are referred back to come back today. And I would like you to make a decision on what's here today in front of you. Exclude Councillor Pryor email and focus on the agenda we have today.
Chair,
Just to confirm, you've referenced there, Councillor Anderson, this being an instruction from an executive, but it's not an instruction. This is a letter of representation in the same way as any other representation letter would come in relation to a planning application and to be considered. There's, as you know, having been on panel for a number of years, there's that distinct, different role of the council, one as local planning authority and one as a council. In this instance, council as provider of education for numerous children across the city. So that is almost the basis on and background to the letter of representation as the council. But you are here as members of the council today. That's the council as local planning authority. So it's not an instruction to members to vote or think in a certain way. It's simply, as with all letters of representation, it's a letter expressing the view of a party who wants to comment upon the application. And still your role as members of planning committee, a planning committee for the local planning authority, remains as it always has done.
On this note, I'm not going to debate this any further. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to make a decision on what you request at the 1st of September. If you have any issue with that, then we can clarify that, but let's please don't focus on that email from Councillor Pryor. Steve, can you now please present to him?
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall this application relates to the proposal for a 3G pitch and tennis courts and associated fencing up to 4.5 metres in height at the former South Leeds golf course. The report presented to the members of panel today should be read in conjunction with the earlier plans panel report presented on the 1st of September 2022, which is appended to the covering report as Appendix 1. I would also add that the reference to a draft decision notice in the recommendation of the later report for today should be ignored. I didn't think that you really want another 9 pages with 25 conditions to mull over, so I took that out, but I actually forgot to take that reference out. Following the consideration of this application at South and West Plans Panel on the 1st of September, members resolved to defer this application to enable further information to be provided and specific conditions to be added in full relating to the following issues. So if I can just go through them, there were 18 total points. So there was a landscape management plan, which is added as a condition that's in the full report. A car park management, the full text again is in the report. A construction environmental management plan, condition in the report. A biodiversity enhancement and management plan, condition in text is in the report, and a biodiversity monitoring program condition is in the report, plus a construction access management plan. So all those conditions as requested by members are in full in the report, so you can see the text. The other issues that were raised was to see sight of the community use agreement, which has been appended to the report, and the discussion of the end of life strategy condition for Rubber Crumb. So the first 6 of these issues, as I said, relate to conditions, and you'll see in the text the 5 conditions have actually been laid out because issues 4 and 5 have actually been combined into one condition. Regards issue 7, the applicant has prepared a community use agreement, which is appendix 2 of the report, and that's been presented in full as requested by members. So just to summarise what's in that report, the school will manage the community use of the school facilities and sports facilities in conjunction with the current service level agreement that exists with Leeds City Council's lettings unit to manage the administration of the actual lettings themselves. So the proposed hours of access are as follows. In term time, it's Monday to Friday, 5 till 9 p.m, Saturday, 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 p.m, Sunday, 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 p.m. And during school holidays, it's Friday, 8 a.m. to 9 o'clock p.m, Saturday, 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and Sunday, 8 a.m. till 5 o'clock. Members will note that the hours proposed refer to 9 p.m. on weekdays, but I'd just remind members that the actual access hours of the 3G pitch and the tennis courts will be governed by the available daylight at certain times of the year, because this also refers to other facilities that might be within the actual building itself that would be open later than darkness falling would allow. And just as a fail-safe, if members have had the opportunity to read it in full, if you're not minded to accept this agreement and require any further clarity to avoid delays, of just suggesting an additional condition as an alternative at paragraph 11 of the report. So I'm hoping that members will accept the contents, but if not, there is a condition that we could use to help it along the way. Right, with regard to point 8 and the end of life strategy condition for Rubber Crumb, I'd make the following comments. Now, I've read a lot on this, and I've received a lot of emails very recently about this particular issue. Contrary to what we thought before, it is understood there are several operators who provide innovative solutions for dealing with these such matters and for reusing waste materials in a safe and sustainable way. And I've taken advice from our minerals colleagues who know of companies within Leeds that actually are regulated to deal with the Rubber Crumb. But these processes are regulated by other statutory bodies and legislation, as any type of waste is. It's the responsibility of the waste keeper to ensure that the waste is disposed of properly, and this is ultimately regulated by the Environment Agency. In this instance, therefore, the school would have to ensure that the end-of-life playground surface is collected by a registered waste carrier, and that once this has been done, the school's duty of care is discharged. And they would then assume that the waste carrier will handle the waste properly. There are numerous waste carriers in Leeds and nationwide who handle the process this type of waste and seek to secure its secondary reuse rather than disposal by landfill or incineration. There is one company in County Antrim, part of the UK, that does actually burn it to generate electricity, but in the main it seemed better to actually reuse the Rubber Crumb, and a lot of it actually ends up as ballast in tarmac, Adam, on roads and footpaths. So it's therefore considered economically and environmentally more viable for such waste to be reused ultimately rather than disposed of in any way. I would also point out, as was referred to in the previous discussions, that paragraph 188 of the MPPF states, the focus of planning policies and decisions should not be on whether proposed development is an acceptable use of land, rather than the control or process or emissions, in brackets, where these are subject to separate pollution control regimes, close brackets. Planning decisions should assume that these regimes will operate effectively. So that's a given, we're advised. Equally, where a planning decision has been made on a particular development, the planning issue should not be revisited through permitting regimes operated by pollution control authorities. In these circumstances, it would not be appropriate to attach a condition with regard to an end-of-life strategy for the Rubber Crumb. But in addition, paragraph 55 of the MPPF makes clear that planning conditions should be kept to a minimum and only used where they satisfy the following tests. And just to read through them in full, the first being it has to be necessary, second, relevant to planning, 3 relevant to development to be permitted, 4 enforceable, 5 precise, and 6 reasonable in all other respects. These are referred to in guidance as the 6 tests of conditions, and each of them needs to be satisfied for any condition which an authority intends to apply. Any such condition related to the rubber cum, however, I believe would fail 4 of these tests, and we've taken advice upon this. With regards to issues concerning microplastics entering watercourses, it's understood all the proposed new playing surfaces and access paths will be formed with porous materials. Rainfall will percolate through the surface areas with a layer of gravel that is separated from the natural soils beneath by an impermeable membrane. The volume of the gravel layer is sufficient to store rainfall resulting from a 1 in 100 year storm, plus an additional 40% overflow to allow for climate change. The water that's stored in the gravel is discharged into the nearby stream via a manhole and underground pipework. The manhole contains a flow control device to limit outflow at 5.4 litres per second, and a sump pit to remove any silt or other suspended fine materials, because members were concerned about it going to the watercourse. So just to flick on a few slides, I've got a beautiful cross section of a sump pit. There we go. That's a sump pit. It's a huge tank, and you get a gist of the scale from the yellow rings on the left hand side, which obviously for access for cleaning and facilities. And basically the water overflows into that, is captured, solids either fall to the bottom or are caught by the filter that you can see on the right hand side, and there is a diagrammatic section as well. It's also noted that the gravel layer also acts as a natural filter to remove suspended materials and pollutants from the water flowing through it. As such, it's considered that the rainwater falling onto the proposed sports pitches and access paths is managed, filtered and discharged to the existing watercourse in a manner that prevents it coming into direct contact with the environment. The Council's drainage engineer has raised no objections to this proposal. In addition, the pitch contractor has confirmed that decontamination units will be placed at each gate that will prevent contamination in and out of the pitch. Also, a further measure to prevent windborne contamination is proposed in the form of mitigation boards to the fence up to a height of ½ a metre. Just to go back one. So that gives you an example of the mitigation boards at the bottom to stop any windblown debris coming off the pitches. And there you can see I forget what it's called now, the gate, which in effect is to scrape off any of the crumb into again another hole, which is periodically cleaned, which is the bottom slide of those on there. All of the measures are in accordance with the guidance issued in 2020 by the Sports and Play Construction Association. Just going on, although the scheme is policy compliant, plus 15 trees and therefore acceptable in this respect, members also asked if more trees could be provided by the applicant. The applicant advised that because of delays and rising costs of the materials, they are unable to provide any further additional trees. But I would remind members again that on the basis of the current policy, it is actually compliant. With regard to other matters, whilst not specifically referenced above, during the discussion at South and West Plans Panel on the 1st of September, members also raised the matter of future maintenance of the section of footpath which will be incorporated into the site. And that's subject to the footpath diversion order being approved, which is obviously a secondary process. The applicant has been asked to move the perimeter fence, proposed to allow the path to be kept open. However, the applicant has spoken with the Leeds City Council project managers regarding this and have been advised that, again, for reasons of safeguard and security and long-term maintenance, they wish to continue with the diversion of the footpath bridleway. So at the moment, they're saying that the fence would remain to the northern side of the cobbled footway. Once the fence is erected, the existing public right-of-way will be then within the school boundaries, so its maintenance will fall to the school, and the school have accepted that maintenance liability. For completeness, it's also been suggested, though, that another condition should be imposed, and I'll just read this out in full, which is prior to development brought into use, a scheme to retain and maintain the section of the footpath known as Leeds 207, as shown containing the red line application boundaries should be submitted to approved in writing by the local authority. There is some more wording, but I'll just shorten it. I'd also add on this point that we've received a further 2 emails concerning the footpath from members of the public, one of which is from the Save South Leeds Former Golf Course Community Group and one from the Beeston Neighbourhood Planning Team. They point out that the path that does actually lie within the Beeston neighbourhood plan, and it appears that the southernmost boundary of the plan does indeed run along the alignment of the path. And this is actually on the Beeston neighbourhood plan non-designated heritage asset survey. So the bulk of the site, excepting that little sliver, and I'll just go back to give you an indication of where it is. I think forward actually in this case. If you can see there's a red line at the top of the pitch. The path runs down that red line, and actually on the neighbourhood plan, the boundary follows that too. So, accepting what's in the Beeston neighbourhood plan, the path itself would lie within their plan, but as I say, the bulk of the site actually lies to the south and outside of it. Just to point out, however, that this is still part of their initial policy intentions work. And the NDHA list still needs to be thoroughly assessed to check whether each identified asset fulfills the criteria for designation. So it's not been accepted as such as yet. And furthermore, as was pointed out at the last plans panel, that the plan is still in the preparation stage, and as such has no material weight as yet. Reference is also made to my comments concerning the golf course being a man-made landscape made in response to the area being described as meadowland, but goes further to say that it's also a part of historic mining landscape, and other parts of the park are designated as scheduled ancient monument for early mining works. This is correct, but and has a national significance, but I would again like to remind members that the application site has no protected status in this regard. So other areas have, but this area does not. A further email was received yesterday from residents of the South Lee estate, which is to the north of the main part of the school's playing pitches, which I think was sent to all members of City Plans panel. But however, this would include councillors Finnegan and Campbell. I think that was done in error, to be fair. So two of the members have seen sight of that. Most of the points that it raises are actually already covered. One or two are suggestions in terms of how you might deal with certain things. I mean, I will pick out the ones that struck me as being different because the others have been discussed at great length previously. And one was that if the proposal was to go ahead, can we please put further restrictions on the school such that no further planning will be granted in areas currently deemed as playing areas? Well, obviously that's completely unnecessary because any other further works would come forward as a planning application to be discussed anyway. So it wouldn't be appropriate to put such a condition on. What else have we got? A wish or a desire for the school to provide evidence as to their full usage of the sporting facilities for the next 10 years and to have penalties upon the full value of the council funding, given if these are not achieved with waivers due to extreme weather and acts of God. This is not something that would have been imposed on any other school in terms of a community use agreement, and would be unreasonable. There's reference to actually giving over what's described as unusual and boggy pitch to be subsumed into the park in compensation for the 5% reduction of the golf course as a result of this proposal. But again, I've got to remind members that although these ideas have some merit, the reality is that the school is still underprovided. That pitch is usable at times, just not in extreme wet weather when it does become boggy. So it would not again be reasonable to be expected that pitch to be given over, and it would just create a similar situation that we have now where the school's left with a deficit of playing pitch provision. And then this morning, around about 10:30, I received a further 3 submissions from Save South Leeds former golf course community group. They were about 9 pages in length, and they do make reference to a number of websites, articles and journals suggesting caution should be approached when using plastic/rubber crumb-based products which may contain potentially harmful chemicals, and that the European Chemical Agency is proposing to restrict microplastics use, and that the council should not rely on other legislation to control harm. But then it also accepts that there is no legislation at present to prevent the use of artificial turf or rubber crumb. So it urges caution, which I think we all accept, but there is no legislation to actually prevent its use. And of course, we know that it's used throughout the country. Also, data is still being collected on the environmental and health impacts of artificial turf, and scientists continue to assess exposure risk to various chemicals through the lifetime. And as I say, continue to urge caution, but there's no restrictions. I can only remind members again whether we as a planning service or a determining authority, like it or not, it's not currently an issue for the planning system, and disposal is controlled and regulated by other bodies and legislation. So it would not be appropriate to try and restrict or control that through the planning process or in this forum. And finally, as we've talked about earlier at the beginning of this meeting, I did receive a further representation from Councillor Pryor maintaining his support for the proposal. So members, just in conclusion, against this background and in the context of the appended main planning report previously presented to members, it's concluded that development is acceptable in planning terms and is therefore recommended that the application be approved subject to the conditions listed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. I'll go to a question from members, but as I mentioned earlier, I'm only going to allow question and what based and what was deferred to. And I don't want to go back to the two previous meetings. We are only here today to focus and from the 1st of September. So is there any, Councillor Campbell?
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully I'll stick to the script. Right. If this is agreed, I noticed there are a number of references to the local authority agreeing in writing some of the conditions. Would it be possible, if this is agreed, to add to that before first use of the pitch? I only ask that question because I think probably all of us have developments in our ward where things happen and there's still a number of outstanding conditions that haven't been signed off by the council. And given the controversy around this particular development, I think it would be diplomatic, if nothing else, if we added that sentence, because there appears to me to be nothing in here that couldn't be worked out before they actually got the thing up and running. Okay?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Second point, can I ask another question? I am conscious that at the last meeting, a number of members expressed a view in relation to the materials used and what happens when they reach the end of their life. And I understand from what Mr. Butler said that his advice is that it will be inappropriate for us to specifically condition the materials. I think that's what you said. Effectively, specifically condition that there has to be an end of life or a 10-year end of life scheme for the disposal of the rubber crumb. That's what you actually said, I think. All right, you're telling me that's not what you said. Sorry? Oh.
But no, sorry, I don't know whether it's slightly at cross purpose. What I was suggesting is that specifying how it's actually disposed and actually asking for that information to be brought back to the panel, because that's covered by other regulatory bodies. That's what we can't condition. So it's actually the way it's disposed of is covered by other bodies.
Right. Okay. But it would be, and I'm conscious of the fact that this is a site within the green belt, and presumably the school will go on forever. But under normal circumstances, it would seem to me that we would include a condition which required at the end of life, or when the pitches cease to be used for the designation we're giving it at the moment, that the owner, which would be the school, would have in place, or we would expect the owner to restore the site to its original condition. I.e., if for any reason whatsoever, and I'm not saying they will, but if for any reason whatsoever they cease to use this as an all-weather pitch, in fact, well, if they change the use, they would need a different planning application. But if they cease to use the pitch, if they cease to use the area altogether, then it should be restored to greenbelt. Have I made that clear, or am I rambling a bit there?
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I do understand it. I don't think we can do it. I'm just having a discussion with Jonathan about it, because it actually is effectively a permanent condition. So covering the circumstances whereby if it should fall into, well, I don't know. I mean, falls into disrepair or is no longer used, could you apply a condition to actually have it returned back to its original state? No. Sorry, Councillor Campbell. I mean, we advised no that we couldn't do it.
Well, I'd be interested to understand why not, because I know of other planning permissions granted by the authority where, in effect, we've expressed the view that there's a requirement for the site to be restored to its original condition if the use ceases. And I think we're all of the view, and I wouldn't perhaps be quite so worried if it wasn't for the fact that we're just in the middle of a consultation about closing a school in my ward. And so we've no idea how long Coburn will last. Presumably it'll last forever. But if for some reason, bearing in mind it's green belt, you know my view on losing green belt, I believe we have the power to put a condition on which basically says if it ceases to be used as a playing pitch, it has to be restored to green belt. In effect, that stops you using it as a car park.
Understand that, Councillor Campbell, sorry, Chair, but I think the other instances that you're referring to are effectively temporary permissions where the likelihood is that it's known from the outset that the use is going to cease, whereas this is actually a permanent permission. So I don't think we can do it, Chair. Would you agree?
I think the other difference in this one is that it's an operational development that's being approved rather than a use of land, whereby if it was a use which could cease at some point in the future, there may be an opportunity to restore it to its previous condition, as you say, whereas this is operational development, which it requires taking out of a grassed area and replacement with a new facility per se. I mean, it'd be very unusual, in my opinion, unreasonable to impose a condition to that degree, even though it's currently greenbelt land. I understand the point being made, though.
Any more questions to Steve? Any more? No? Can I go to comments? Any comments? Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, this is our third pass at this application. And what we've heard today from Mr. Butler is what's best described as an extremely comprehensive review, run-through, Chair, of all the planning issues that are actually germane to this application and our deliberations this afternoon. These sentences are not starting well, Chair, I have to say. Maybe I should start again. He's going through in great detail the matters that are actually germane to our deliberations this afternoon. And I think that's important that we have that very clear and front and center in our minds. There has been extensive correspondence aimed at panel members of some of into great length and great detail. Not much of those correspondence was actually relevant to our decision making this afternoon, unfortunately. We've covered at extent the materials used for the all-weather pitch rather. That's covered by this legislation, but Mr. Butler's detailed how drainage matters are handled, end of life to be handled. So those I am extremely satisfied with, but I wouldn't consider those material planning considerations in any case, Chair. There was considerable correspondence regarding the climate emergency, and as you'll be aware, Chair, I have considerable experience and knowledge with regard to climate emergency. I find it extremely difficult to consider the loss of the relatively small number of trees here to be relevant when we're not only replacing them ×3, but we're a city that's planting 5.6 million trees over the next 20 years. That's 5.6 million trees over the next 20 years. Also, I don't think that the loss of 5% of a previously inaccessible golf course represents a significant loss of amenity to the community and should be considered as a sufficient reason to notice application, especially when you consider the incredibly considerable gain for the community's children. And I've made that point at length, Chair. I won't want to rehash it. So if we view And I'll just a further couple of points actually, Chair, before I bring up big old planning decision dial. Community use, we've had that satisfied. The relevant, perhaps the most relevant point is it is green belt. There is a green fence in it. It is a green railing fence. I don't think in good conscience we could consider that sufficient a reason to say no to this application. In fact, when we look at all the issues laid out, Chair, there aren't any reasons sufficient to say no to this application. Not one. And I think members should consider that. And if all planning decisions are an absolute yes or an absolute no, with a crossover point in the middle, and lots of planning decisions go, you know, somewhere either way of that crossing point. To me, Chair, as a planning councillor with 11 years experience and 4 years as a plans chair, I see absolutely no reason to say no to this application. So I'll be voting in favour of it, and at an appropriate juncture, I'll be prepared to move the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. So the recommendation has been moved. Could someone second the recommendation?
Sorry, is that the end of comments?
Is that the end of comments? Councillor.
I was happy to comment and then formally second the proposition if my colleague has formally moved it at this particular point. We did have a strong exchange of views last time, and a lot of the concerns that were raised have been addressed. I raised a concern about community use. I've looked at the community use section. I think that's solid. I think that will help and benefit this particular community. This school has done wonderful things in South Leeds. South Leeds, from an education point of view, if you go back many, many years, was a basket case. It's not a basket case anymore. This is doing a fabulous job with working class kids who are often coming from very difficult backgrounds at this particular point. And it's a question of recognising that those same working class kids have had a tough time over the last 2-3 years with a pandemic and other such things. They're the ones who are generally left behind. They're the ones who need that bit of help and bit of support at this particular stage. School are doing a fine job. If you look purely at the planning issues at this particular point, there are no real strong grounds for a refusal, because the site itself, the pitch itself, is entirely and utterly appropriate in green belt. You're down to debating the issues surrounding conditions or whether a green fence is really such a problem in the green belt that it overwhelmingly overtakes the positives in terms of giving these working class kids the best start that we can possibly give them. And as my colleague says over there, and on this rare occasion that I'm agreeing with him, I don't think there is much of a balance here. I don't think this is a marginal decision. I think the positives are so overwhelming and the negatives so slight that it would be regrettable entirely and utterly if we didn't back this school and back this community. On that basis, Chair, I am quite comfortable to formally second my learned colleague's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Finnegan, and I totally agree with every word from yourself and Councillor Walsh. Councillor.
Yeah, I've listened to everything that's been said. I'm still concerned about the lighting issue. We've got the community agreement from the school attached as an appendices, which does say, till 9 o'clock at night. Now, what I'm worried about is the lighting. I understand the lighting's getting put in because it's cost saving. I get that. We had that discussion last time, but I'm then concerned that this agreement, this community use agreement of the school, is taken as read, and therefore those lights can be erected and they start using it till 9 o'clock at night. So I understand that you're saying that the pitch can only be used in daylight hours, but there's nothing in this community agreement that says that, is there? So I am still concerned that these lights are going to be put in, and then before we know it, the columns have gone up and we're using this community agreement and it says, 9 o'clock at night here, we can do it. So I still have reservations on that.
Chair, I think that was meant to be a comment, but actually is a question that's worth answering. Any floodlighting would be the subject of another application. This community use agreement has got to cover all circumstances in terms of the existing use of the school, including buildings that are used internally, which may be open obviously after hours of darkness, but it does not give any support or credence to an application that may come forward for external lighting of the pitches. And I'm certain, because of the controversy that we've had so far with this, we'd obviously be back here anyway.
I absolutely understand that those lights are subject to another planning application. What I'm concerned about is they won't bother with the planning application and it'll just happen, is what I'm concerned about, because all the power and everything is going to be laid when the pitch is laid. So I am concerned that that's going to be taken as a, we'll just do it and we'll put a retrospective planning application in, and we've got a community agreement that says we can rent it out till night, lease it out till 9 at night. That's what I'm concerned about.
Sorry, I understand that concern, but when you think about how you actually try to capture and write a community use agreement, you're doing it for obviously throughout the whole of the year. So if you were to try and somehow restrict it so that it could only be used at up to a certain time, which wasn't till 9 o'clock, how do you actually do that when, of course, daylight hours change every day by 10 minutes?
Well, that's the daylight hours.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, I don't want to go back into another debate. We want to comment on what was here in bulletproof. So if this is not one of them, I would like to discuss.
It can be amended, as Councillor Hazel would have said. So it can only be, so the pitches and the tennis courts can only be used during daylight hours. Yeah, if that's what members want. So we could add the condition to that effect, or alter the community use agreement to that effect, if that helps. But as I said, you would still you would still have to submit a further application for the lighting anyway. But yes, we could add that to the community use agreement. I don't think the school would be troubled by that, because ultimately, if an application came forward anyway, there's a possibility they might be trying to alter the community use agreement as well because of the hours restrictions. But I'm sure we could alter the community use agreement so that the pitches and the tennis courts are only used throughout daylight hours. Okay.
The book, is it a comment? Because I've already moved from question.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. The community use agreement seems to cover the whole school, not just the pitches. So, like, if any amendments are put in place, then it needs to be clear that it only covers the pitches and the tennis courts, and that so that it doesn't impact on the community use of the school building.
Okay. So are there any other comments? No?
Just quickly summarize.
So yeah, could I ask?
It's properly captured. So basically, with the recommendation which to approve, subject to the 25 specified conditions and a variation of the community use agreement that relates specifically to the use of the new 3G, 4G, I forgot, what is it, 5G pitch, whatever it is, the pitch and the tennis courts to be only used during daylight hours. The application has been moved by Councillor Walshaw and seconded by Councillor Finnegan. Thank you, Chair.
I'll start again. Could I ask all those in favor of the application? Okay, all those against? Those abstain?
Sorry, Chair. Councillors Smith, Anderson and Campbell, I don't think actually
made
any of the abstentions.
You're not voting, you're not abstaining, you're just
quiet. It has to be an abstention by default, I think, Chair.
Yeah, so it's abstaining. Okay, so I'm pleased. Okay. Okay, you made a decision not to vote. So we've got 6 in favor and 1 abstain. Is that correct?
So
it's-
sorry, Chair, I've just 6 in favour, none against, and 3 simply not voting.
3 not voting. Yeah, there's 1.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Hamilton did abstain. My
Yeah,
apologies. Sorry,
Councillor
yeah, there is
Hamilton
one abstention.
I'm pleased to say this application has been carried. Can I take the opportunity to thank members for their time? Thank you very much.